What's up, everybody? Matt Gajewski here, back again with the Stochastic DFS channel. Today we're talking college football DFS ahead of Week 12, Friday, 2-gamer. Before we get started, make sure to hit that thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you know when this and all other content goes live. We're also brought to you by Prize Picks. They have a first match deposit bonus for new users up to $100, and they're giving you a free month of Odd Shopper. All kinds of tools on Odd Shopper, sides, totals, player props, which is going to help you directly with Prize Picks, a player prop-based site. They have NBA, NFL, all the major sports, as well as a ton of niche sports, and they have college football. So on top of that $100, you get one free month of Odd Shopper. Make sure to check that out. Link below. If you or somebody who knows a gambling problem, please call or text 1-800-GAMBLER. Must be 21 to play. All right, we'll bring you behind the glass. 2-game slate on deck and 2 awesome games with high totals. We've got USF taking on UTSA to kick things off. South Florida is second in pace. They have a 45% pass rate. UTSA is 26th in pace. They have a 47% pass rate. The spread is currently 15.5 in favor of UTSA, and the total is 67 points. Points for days in this game. We're going to start with the Byron Brown quarterback side of things for USF. Byron Brown is very mobile. He's not a great passer, but 659 yards for Byron Brown. And then as a passer, what he lacks in efficiency, he makes up for with this second-ranked pace. I mean, my goodness, he's still at 256 yards per game. Again, not efficient. UTSA is one of the better defenses he will have faced, but I mean, there's still a pretty weak coverage unit. They're outside the top 100. Not that Byron Brown is particularly efficient at exploiting some of the worst pass defenses, but man, the resistance shouldn't be that tough for him. And then whatever he gives you on the ground is awesome. He's a really good price-adjusted play on this slate, even if you don't think the talent is quite there, which is kind of where I'm at. Backfield, you're looking at a committee, and honestly, it's a 3-way committee with the backs, and then you include Byron Brown. And I mean, we've got 4 guys running the ball here because Byron Brown he's going to touch the ball somewhere between like 8 and 12 times designed, not even including his scrambles. But as far as the backs go, Naquan Wright, he's going to lead the group. You're going to see Kelly Joyner, who's back from injury, change of pace. And Michael Dukes is also going to play a slight role. Last game, 17 carries for Naquan Wright, 10 for Joyner, 5 for Dukes. I expect this to be the rotation, but I mean, even if they get killed in this game, USF has lost plenty of games this year. You're still looking at so many raw plays that Naquan Wright, Kelly Joyner, those 2 in particular, I'm like somewhat interested in them for DFS purposes. And Kelly Joyner in particular is their pass game back. Only 6 targets on the year, but some of that due to injury. I expect him to handle most of the pass game work. There's not a team that throws to the back position a ton, so just at least worth noting. But yeah, I'm going to play some Naquan Wright and Kelly Joyner just because of the raw play volume. In the receiving game, the big news of this game is the status of Michael Brown-Stephens. He missed their last contest. It's South Florida. Don't expect like elite reporting or anything from this team. But his absence was big. This is a near full-time player for this team. So I think immediately his status kind of changes where you want to approach things. The wide receiver 1 is going to be Sean Atkins. Sorry, looking up his routes. Sean Atkins is going to be your wide receiver 1 pretty clearly too. 90% of routes last game. Nothing really to see there. The game prior, Michael Brown-Stephens was at 96. So, I mean, his absence, I'm expecting him to be the wide receiver 2 if he's active. From there, we did see Yusuf Terry return from injury, which was important. He had been a full-time receiver prior to this year, and then first came back, 69% of routes. Again, Michael Brown-Stephens didn't play, but that was second only to Sean Atkins. So Yusuf Terry immediately saw 6 targets back from injury. He's 3,500. Very strong price-adjusted play, as are Atkins and Brown-Stephens if they both play. They're both, I mean, just too cheap for the volume. But if we don't have Michael Brown-Stephens, who do we look at beyond Yusuf Terry and Sean Atkins? The first guy I'd look to is Jaden Alexis, 59% of the routes. That was better than Naeem Simmons, who was at 41%, and better than Khafre Brown, who was at 36%. There's a little bit of ebb and flow to these guys. I think what we can guarantee is that Sean Atkins is going to have the best route rate. I would bet Yusuf Terry is number 2, and then I would tentatively put it Jaden Alexis, Naeem Simmons, Khafre Brown, but I don't feel as strongly about that Even 2 games ago, we saw Coffrey Brown lead that group. And again, all that is null and void if Brown Stevens plays. This team doesn't really use a tight end, so don't worry about that. UTSA, we've got Frank Harris. A little bit of narrative, but this is his last home game of a storied career, a 7-year career. But Frank Harris is no more. He has better rushing equity than I think the overall stats suggest. The guy had a lower body injury to begin the year, and it's limited him. He also plays behind a horrific offensive line. What he makes up for it with, though, is incredible efficiency. As a passer, he's averaging 237.5. And then when he does run, which he's been running more lately, you have awesome upside with him. Touchdowns. I mean, he's had 100-yard games in the past. They're still fast. He's been limited in some action, so the stats on paper don't look great, but Frank Harris is right there. I'd actually prefer him 1-to-1 over Byron Brown, and a lot of that just because they're nearly 16-point favorites. You get a 41 team total versus a 26 team total with USF. Just so much more touchdown equity with Frank Harris. The backfield's a mess, and we're expected to get Kavori and Barnes back. Prior to the injury, I mean, they went full committee even before the injury. Like, let's look at the second most recent game. Kavori and Barnes, 16 carries. Robert Henry, 13. Rocco Griffin, 10. And Rocco Griffin's a Vanderbilt transfer. This isn't some slouch. And you can just, look at the data back 3 games. This has been an approach they've taken multiple times this year. I think we see Barnes tentatively lead this, but at 6,600, he's overpriced. I'd rather get down to Robert Henry and Rocco Griffin, all of whom should have success against the USF run defense, allowing almost 5 yards per attempt. But really where you can go for UTSA pairing Frank Harris is with these receivers. It's very clear what they're doing. Josh Cephas, man, he's too cheap at $6K, averaging 9 targets per game, 80 yards, never leaves the field. Even Tyke Ogle-Kellogg has a pretty good price-adjusted play, 6 targets in each of the last 3 games. He's another guy that never leaves the field for this team. The wide receiver 3 position is up in the air a little bit. Willie McCoy went down with an injury in their last game, and it didn't look promising. He was stretchered off, so I think he's going to be out. That set up Devin McEwen for a 59% route share, which was pretty good. They basically will rotate other players on the field for a situational snap here and there. But I think Devin McEwen is pretty locked in as the wide receiver 3 at this point. We just saw him come off a 6-target game himself. He's also another value play you could look to. If you want to play the tight end, Oscar Cardenas plays the most. His route rate was just shy of 60% last game, but he's been touch and go with that all year. Never really hits 70. He's kind of locked into this 55 to 65% range, but also pretty cheap. I'm okay with Cardenas as a value. Second game, Colorado takes on Washington State, 4.5-point spread. Another electric total, 62.5. Again, both teams really fast. Colorado 7th in pace, Washington State 19th. These teams throw a bit more than the previous matchup. So we've got Colorado with a 61% pass rate, Washington State at 63%. Shedeur Sanders is very expensive, but his price is coming down a little bit now. I mean, after, the TCU game in their non-con, where he had the 500-yard game, his price just soared. And he was impossible to play because he still takes sacks and these negative rushing yards in the year. But he's finally coming down into a palatable range, over 300 yards per game. Again, doesn't run at all, but the volume's amazing, 42.5 attempts. The Washington State secondary certainly doesn't scare you. So I'm going to play Shedeur. In the backfield, this is almost a complete X-out spot for me. The only thing that I think is noticeable is Sevion Wilkerson started their last game. He had 7 carries, and he's the cheapest of the bunch. They still use Dylan Edwards as the preferred pass catcher, so it's not like we're locked into any secure floor with Wilkerson. But yeah, I mean, this is probably just you're running a lot of lineups, sprinkle in the Colorado guys, otherwise not a lot of interest. The only positive here, I guess, is that Alton McCaskill redshirted, so you do have it somewhat narrowed to Edwards, Hankerson, and Wilkerson. I think Wilkerson's the best price-adjusted play, but he's still on the outside looking in for me. I prefer the South Florida backs and the UTSA backs. In the receiving game, extremely easy to figure out Colorado. You have 3 options. Xavier Weaver, Jimmy Horn, and Travis Hunter never leave the field. I think Travis Hunter is the best bet efficiency-wise. Just price-adjusted, 76 yards per game, 9 targets. You don't have to pay as much as you do for Weaver, and his opportunity is better than Horn. He makes the most sense to me, but honestly, you can't really go wrong playing any of the 3. I will have exposure to all 3 of these guys with no real qualms. where things get dicey is when you gamble on who is going to be the wide receiver 4 for Colorado. When they were injured, they used Harrison at tight end. They've since abandoned him. His route rate was just 29% last game. And then it has been wide receiver 4 roulette. Initially, to begin the year, it was Giovanni Antonio. He gets hurt. Then it was Tarvaris Dawson for 3 games. They bench him for Omarion Miller. I, of course, played Tarvaris Dawson that game. The benching occurred. It got buried. Since then, they've benched Omarion Miller, and Giovanni Antonio has now regained his position as wide receiver 4. What I will say is that this is still volatile. Omarion Miller's on the field a little bit. Last 2 games, 21 and 56% of the routes before not being targeted last game. You had Giovanni Antonio at 79%, 47%, and 48%. So you're not locked into anything. And then they've also been rotating in guys like Caleb Mathis, who had a 19% route rate last game as well. All I'm trying to say here is I would prefer to get up to Xavier Weaver, Jimmy Horn, and Travis Hunter. For those of you playing the larger tournaments, the guys I would prefer in this order would be Antonio, Miller, Mathis, just large field tournament plays. Washington State, Cam Ward, expensive, but makes a lot of sense. He essentially has the same passing numbers as Shedeur Sanders on fewer attempts, only 41 per game, but 312 yards. And then he doesn't take zeros in the ground. So just flat out better play, in my opinion. Washington State's also favored in this game. The Colorado secondary is just as bad as Washington State's, if not worse. And then you have the rushing floor you don't have with Shedeur. So Cam Ward, straight up better play. Number 1 quarterback play on the board for me in this game environment. He's just an easy click. In the backfield, and just for to rank these guys, I would go Ward 1, Harris 2, Shedeur 3, Byron Brown 4. But this is, don't read too much into the rankings. I think they're all pretty good plays, and I'm going to be pretty spread in terms of my ownership. But for those of you that want the rankings, that's how I would do it. The backfield's a complete mess because Nakia Watson's playing through an injury, and he's been limited to just 2 carries in the last 2 games. They've also had injuries and suspensions. Jalen Jenkins and Dylan Payne haven't been out there. So Leo Pulalisi and Juvensly Schlenbacher have been the 2 backs carrying the load, and they've been in a pure committee. Honestly, Juvensly Schlenbacher is probably my preferred option here, just because he's cheaper, and we've seen more of him of late. But again, Nakia Watson could be healthier in this game. We don't know what this split is going to look like. I think worst case scenario is just full 3 or 4 back committee. So even at the prices, I don't have a ton of interest in these guys. My favorite backs to target are the USF and UTSA backs, as crazy as that is. It's definitely a 2-back slate. It's a very weak running back slate overall, but I'll be just trying to save the most money, jamming stud receivers. One of whom is Lincoln Victor, who's averaging 15 targets per game over the last 4 games, 80 yards per game, just a monstrous target share, and it's been even more condensed of late. Wide receivers 2 and 3 are Kyle Williams and Josh Kelly. Honestly, a 200 price difference for Victor and Kelly, just get Victor. 400 for Kelly and Victor, just get Victor. FanDuel's a different story where Kyle Williams is 8K and Lincoln Victor is 9.6. So that's a bit more debatable. But man, DraftKings, I'm just getting up to Victor. No real questions. Wide receiver 4, better rotation. You'll see Carlos Hernandez sometimes. They'll use tight ends. Cooper Mathers is their main tight end. But still, it's not like Cooper Mathers has a great route rate or something. I'll scroll down to Washington State. It was all the way up at their opponent, Colorado. But Cooper Mathers, his route rate comes in at, that's Washington. Cameron Johnson. Can't find him. 50%. Sorry, guys. It's hard to find all these names just scrolling through the spreadsheet. But anyway, 50% of the routes. It's actually better than I thought. But the 2 prior games, 40%, 33%. There's risk there. Hernandez was at 24% and 20%. Yeah, just not great for these ancillary pass catchers outside of Victor, Williams, and Kelly. So again, to sum up the slate, I'll probably be playing in most lineups one of the expensive guys, Ward or Sanders, one of the cheap guys, Harris or Brown. Just going as cheap as I can at running back, and then jamming stud receivers, getting one of Horn, Weaver, Hunter, getting Lincoln Victor, and then probably playing some combination of Josh Cephas and Atkins and whoever rounds it out. If you have a question, reach out to me on Twitter at Matt_Gajewski. If you have a comment, leave it below. Otherwise, we'll be back tomorrow breaking down the main slate. Until then, good luck, everyone. We'll see you later.